Putting aside the performance of the last couple of weeks and also putting it in context, again, very successful regular season and SEC championship from the Eastern Division side for the Florida Gators. We bring in David Waters from Gator Sports Radio to help us break it down. So, David, I saw every play of the game yesterday against Alabama. You can look statistically and see domination from the Crimson Tide. You can also consider that despite the limitations on offense and all the things that we've talked about for a number of weeks, it was a 12-7 game into the third quarter. So Florida, with that defensive front, with the entire defense, and with the Antonio Callaway punt return, pretty much salvaged as much as it could in trying to hang in that game.
Right, they just couldn't get anything going. And you said their defense, was good enough to at least keep them in the game, which was pretty much, we knew the case going in. It was, and just the kind of last month of the season is kind of how we figured the season would go. But Florida started off hot, but it was it was the defense that was good enough to keep them in every game, but an offense that could also lose any game. And then it kind of reared its ugly head late in the season. Then Alabama, going against that defense, that's the defense that's going to take care of any weakness against the opposing offense. And, coming into this game, it was apparent that the main weakness for Florida was quarterback play. And Treon Harris, never had a chance, especially with the running game not being able to get going. Kelvin Taylor, just, there was nothing there for him to even try and break one. I don't really think he got enough carries, but, Florida was kind of battling from, behind. They couldn't really do anything on first down. So it was starting right there and just couldn't really get anything going. And Alabama was going to stop the run. We kind of knew that. Nobody's really run on them all season. So it was going to be in the hands of Treon Harris to beat them. And, like you said, you can look at the stats and see that just wasn't there.
Yeah, you can't even assess the Florida defensive performance based on the stats, because much like the situation the week before against Florida State, worn down late, there was a situation, I think, a point in the game, very late in the game, when Alabama passed 90 plays on that last drive when they were driving near the goal line. And Florida still, I think, finished with 35 plays. It was something like that. Low 90s, 92, 93 plays for Alabama, 35 plays for Florida. You just can't expect a defense to go out there time and time again against Derrick Henry and against the type of athleticism Alabama has on the outside and hold down that offense forever.
Right, and that was the lowest output for Florida all season on offense by far. And then, it was – looking at they had 7 drives. It was at least 3 and outs. You can't do that. And this is, and it was kind of smoke and mirrors. With the way Florida had played the last month of the season, we saw, like I said, we saw this coming. But only total 14 total drives, and half of those were 3 and outs. 7 3 and outs. So the average starting field position was their own 25, and even when they maybe had an inkling of something would go wrong. And there were a couple big plays there, but a good, I think, 46-yard pass to Callaway, and then the Hail Mary that was caught, but when the game was already well in hand for Alabama. It's just Treon Harris is just really not the right fit for this Jim McElwain offense.
David Waters from Gator Sports Radio. I think he froze up on us. Hopefully he'll jump back on board here, mentioning the long touchdown pass to C.J. Wharton that made it 29-15 when they got the 2-point conversion. So Wharton takes it in from 46 yards, and against a great defense, when you're that limited passing the football, even with 5-6 minutes left, you knew it was over, but technically there's a glimpse of hope there when it's 29-15. It's a 2-score game, and there's like 6 minutes left in the game after throwing a touchdown pass. But in this particular situation, of course, the Gators can't get it done. Derrick Henry, 44 for 189. Again, the Florida defense did not allow him a rush longer than 9 yards for like ever in that game. So he broke one off for 21 yards late in the ball game, but otherwise, hey, David, you with us?
Yeah, I am.
Good stuff. I was filling in for you. I was doing
All right.
the guest analyst spot here for a second, and what I picked up on was, if Florida had any kind of offensive life out of the passing game, when CJ Wharton made that incredible catch in the end zone to make it a two-score game at 29-15, and you got the 2-point conversion, Alabama's defense is still too tough, but a reasonable offense still is a glimmer of hope with like 6 minutes left, two-score game, but you still knew that there was just nothing there. And then I was just noting that Derrick Henry, until late in the game, he had a 21-yard run very, very late in the game when the game was over. 9 yards was his longest run. So despite all the compilation of statistics, they didn't let him loose.
Right, and it looked much like Dalvin Cook the week before, where he didn't really go crazy on the Florida defense until the fourth quarter. I guess the only gripe we had from this Florida defense, from the game against Alabama was, the DBs are the ones who let the big plays happen, and that's what Florida's relied on for most of the year as the rock of this team and the rock of this defense. And, it was to give credit to the Bama receivers. The Florida DBs were just as good in the play as the Alabama receivers were, and they just went up and made the play. But, when the defense is on the field that much, that's going to happen. You keep giving an offense that many chances, they're going to capitalize when, the offense is that good for Alabama.
Yeah, and just to extend the point about the Wharton catch and getting to 2 scores, if you had it, the type of passing game that you would need to face against Alabama. He came out after, got a stop, and then the very next series, Treon had the bootleg where the tight end was wide open, and he missed him. That would have been a huge gain. And then the very next play, he would have had a first down again, but he missed Callaway running down the seam. That would have been a big play as well. And you get out past midfield, and you got some life. But when you can't connect on the plays that are there, it's a tough deal. So before we get to the bowl game and just your thoughts about the bowl slotting, it's that time of year, especially with a program that funnels so many players to the NFL. News in regards to who's staying, who's leaving from the Florida camp to the NFL draft.
Yeah, in the locker room last night, of course, reporters, start asking the questions of what's next for some of these guys. And, no surprise here, but Vernon Hargreaves pretty much said, he's going to the NFL. One of college football's best cornerbacks, in basically his whole career at Florida since he came in as a freshman. No surprise, he declared early for the NFL draft. And Jared Davis, the linebacker who really came on for Florida this year, helped Antonio Morrison in the middle, solidify the defense. He's going to return for the Gators next year. So, that's probably going to be, looking at the numbers, he probably has a strong case for, a first-team linebacker going into the next year, preseason All-SEC. So, big news for the Gators there. Demarcus Robinson, wide receiver, still says he hasn't decided, but with all the suspensions he's went through and, some lackadaisical play last night and a personal foul again last night showing his frustration, I can't imagine him coming back. He'll probably actually be asked, to find to find his way into the NFL somehow, some way. And then, we're still Marcus May is another guy that hasn't really come out, but most people are leaning that he'll probably return. So, but we'll probably hear some more, coming out. But those are the main ones last night that snuck out of the locker room a little bit.
So we have yet to hear from Jim McElwain on the game against Michigan. We'll hear that from a news conference in the next couple of days. Also, obviously, we've got plenty of time to prep Michigan and break things down. But just your initial response to facing Michigan in the Citrus Bowl.
I like it. It's going to be a good test. Both quarterbacks, Jim Harbaugh and Jim McElwain, in their first seasons. Both guys exceeded expectations in their first season, so it should be a pretty good matchup there. It's going to be interesting to see, with a month to prepare, if this Gator offense can really get in stride and give that Michigan defense a test, and also the other way around. Who's going to be looking ahead? They say to the draft and all that, and but it's going to be interesting. It's the typical SEC Big Ten matchup everybody looks forward to on New Year's Day. So, it's down here in Orlando, so there should be plenty of Florida fans in the crowd. So, it'd probably be a pro-Florida crowd. But, we've seen that matchup, I think, in 2007, the year Tim Tebow won the Heisman. And Michigan pretty much, handled Florida that day. So it'd be, interesting to see if Florida can turn the tides this time.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Tim Tebow, 2007, down at the either the Capital One or the Outback Bowl. I get them mixed up. Both Big Ten SEC games. It was one of the two, and it was a high-scoring affair. And I think Michigan won by a score with Mike Hart, Chad Henne at quarterback. Then they played about 4 or 5 years before that, 03 in the Outback Bowl, and I think Michigan won a high-scoring game in that one as well, if I recall. So. Florida and Michigan, they've actually scheduled a game. Don't they have a game coming up, kickoff classic kind of deal in Jerry's World, I think, coming up in a few years as well?
Right, yeah, that game is to kick off the 2017 season. So, next year, both teams will kind of build towards that season opener that year. So, there's a nice little preview of that as well, and see where both programs are kind of headed. But those teams will definitely be much different 2017. But nice little pregame note going into that affair in 2017.
Yeah, I love when the two traditional most powerful conferences in college football, when you talk about fan bases and talk about money, and usually when you talk about football, get together, the Big Ten and the SEC. That's one of the reasons why they've got so many ties together. People love the games. They rate well, and you're talking about two storied programs, Michigan and Florida. David Waters from Gator Sports Radio joining us to break down Florida's effort in the SEC title game, look ahead to the Citrus Bowl. David, I'm sure we'll break this one down further. Thanks for jumping on board.
Thanks, Mark.